Hello, welcome back to my channel. Thank you very much for watching. I've got my what I read in December. There are quite a few books this month. I was trying to meet my target of 60 books for the year, and thankfully I reached my target, which I was quite happy about. Although the last book I read was really quite a distressing one, but I will tell you about that in just a moment. So there were 6 books in December, including one which I read in just one day, which was a brilliant book. Let's start with the first one I read. This is An Anonymous Girl, which is by Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen. And this is by the same people who wrote The Wife Between Us, which, to be honest, I didn't really enjoy. And I'd bought this before I read that one. The back of it sounds amazing, and I thought it would be brilliant, but it just didn't hit the mark for me, sadly. It's about a girl called Jessica who signs up for a psychology kind of experiment with a psychologist called Dr. Shields. And it's all a bit kind of weird. She isn't meant to sign up for it. She is a makeup artist who kind of travels to people's houses, and she just happened to overhear one of her clients talking about it and talking about how they probably weren't going to go. So she takes their spot without really telling anyone, which is a bit kind of cheeky. So then she basically becomes sort of embroiled in a really messy, kind of slightly messed up life of Dr. Shields. And it was all just a bit bleh. It just sat a bit flat. I didn't feel any suspense, similar to The Wife Between Us. I didn't feel any suspense. I didn't feel any kind of yeah, it just wasn't doing it for me, which was slightly frustrating. The second book I read this month is Dry by Neil Shusterman and Jared Shusterman, and I absolutely loved this book. It is, I think I'm going to really enjoy reading pretty much all of Neil Shusterman's books, because he writes in a way that is gripping, and it's a dystopia that you can kind of definitely see happening. And it's young adult fiction. It's everything that I like in a book. Now this is about the day that the taps stop working. It's set in California, obviously a very warm place, and it's about what happens to people and how quickly chaos kind of consumes people because there is no water. The main character is called Alyssa, and she and her brother are kind of left to fend for themselves because their parents go out to look for water. The house next door is one of those houses where their parents are so organised. They are basically completely self-sufficient. The house is self-sufficient. It creates its own electricity. They have stored water, and the son is called Kelton, and he is Alyssa's age. So he kind of invites them into his home because very quickly they discover that there just isn't enough water for everyone, and that some people are going to die from not having any water. Kelton's family have what is called a bug out, which is a survival pod, I guess. They have everything in there they need to survive apocalyptic, I don't even know if I said that right, conditions. And so Kelton and his friends set out for the bug out, which is quite a long way from where they are, and they meet people along the way. And I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but this was a book I thoroughly enjoyed. It was one that made me want to keep reading it, which is always a sign of a good book for me. It also was quite ironic that on the second day that I was reading this, we woke up and we didn't have any running water. Now, thankfully in our house we do have a tank, so it was okay from certain parts of the house, but running water from the taps, there wasn't any. So this was kind of an ironic thing to happen around then. The third book I read this month is The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, and this is quite a strange book to get into. It's a really enjoyable read, but it starts off and you realise quite quickly that this man is not in his own body. He's kind of in someone else's body who he doesn't know who they are, which must be a really scary way to wake up, let's be honest. And it turns out that this guy is given a certain amount of hosts, as in the bodies, and he has to, through them, work out how Evelyn Hardcastle is murdered. And each day he starts, every time that one of his hosts sleeps, he starts again in a new host, but he can go back to those hosts unless they're killed. So it's quite complicated trying to keep up with all the different kind of things that are happening throughout the story. But what I quite like is that even though you're reliving the same day over and over again, you're reliving it in different characters, so you're getting more depth to that story. And I really enjoyed that that was kind of what was happening as the book went on, that you kept getting this bigger picture of exactly what's happened, and obviously you're also getting more of an idea of who it could possibly have been who murdered Evelyn Hardcastle. It's a book I really enjoyed reading and would definitely recommend it. The fourth book I read this month is The Reluctant Adult, a book for the perpetually overwhelmed by Katie Kirby, who is Hurrah for Gin. I really enjoyed this book. It is laugh out loud funny in parts. It's very, very relatable, especially the overthinking element, and I definitely need to work on my brain not overthinking so much. It's really quite a funny book, because I feel like if I'd have read it when I was 18, I would just have been like, yeah, no one lives like that. But now that I'm 38, I'm just like, yeah, that book is pretty much spot on. She really describes motherhood really well, the kind of overwhelmingness of it, the highs, the lows, the downright horrific moments, and just the joy when you see your children, you know, achieving or doing, or there are some really good moments too, and I think this book really sums that up. But it's obviously not just for parents, it's for anybody, and it goes through kind of work and overwhelming things about that too. It's a very enjoyable read. The fifth book I read this month is called 5 Feet Apart by Rachel Lippincott, with Mickey Doubttree and Tobias Iaconis, or Laconis, I'm not sure, sorry. I absolutely loved this book. I got it for Christmas, and by the end of Boxing Day I'd finished it. It is a wonderful story, a very heartwarming story. It's young adult fiction, and I know it's already been made into a film, and I'm going to look forward to watching the film now that I've read the book, because I'm one of those people who likes to have read the book before watching a film. Now this book is about a teenager called Stella who has cystic fibrosis, and as I know from reading other books about cystic fibrosis, if you have it, you cannot be close to somebody else who has it, because you run the risk of cross-contamination, and you could potentially even kill each other by being just close to each other. You have to be really careful about who you are around, and you know, infection, you just have to be really, really careful of infection. And this is a disease which is life-limiting. It's, you know, you do not live as long as other people when you have cystic fibrosis. And so you start with meeting Stella, who has a relatively normal life, normal teenager, but she's upset because she can't go on her kind of like trip away with her friends. It's a school trip that she's been organising for like a year, and she can't go on it, and she's upset. But she is in hospital. She's struggling because her lung capacity is at 35%, and that's incredibly low. She's having to wear a special thing to help, that kind of vibrates, which helps to get the stuff off her lungs. And so she's not like in the best place, let's be honest, but she's in hospital. She knows that's where she needs to be. She's really organised, super organised, and she's designing an app for not just cystic fibrosis sufferers, but people who have any kind of medical ailment that requires regular medication. So she's sorting an app to remind people to take that medication, which is a great idea. And while she's in there, her friend Poe is also in there. They've been friends since they were tiny kids. Both have cystic fibrosis. She meets a young boy called Will whilst she's in hospital. Will is a bit of a rebel. He is fighting against his cystic fibrosis. He's angry. He doesn't really see any point in kind of taking the medication. He just thinks if it's going to kill him anyway, then why doesn't it just kill him now? He's very defeatist, which is totally understandable. So they strike up a friendship and then fall in love, which is obviously impossible because they cannot be close to each other, hence 5 feet apart. They're technically not meant to be less than 6 feet apart at all times. So it's a young adult love story. It's romantic, but it's obviously like, it's not unrequited love because they both love each other, but it's a love that cannot happen, and that's really difficult for them, really difficult for the adults around them. The nurses are obviously trying to keep them apart, and it's a really, really good book. You just keep reading because you want to know what happens next. And I'm not going to spoil anything, but it is a fabulous book and I definitely recommend you go and read this one. Okay, the final book, the one I told you about. This was also in my stocking. It's called All My Cats by Bohumi Harabal, and I don't even know where to start. I thought it was going to be about his cats. I don't know if the person who gave it me in my stocking also thought that. And yes, it is about his cats, but it's a memoir, so this is true. And he killed his cat. He murdered his pregnant cat. He murdered kittens. And he feels bad about it, is basically what happens in this story. And it's kind of like, well, I don't really feel sorry for you because you've just murdered cats. So, you know, I'm not sure what you anticipate that I'm going to enjoy or take from this. The epilogue is brilliant. I really enjoyed the epilogue. I really enjoyed the prose in the epilogue, how well it's written, how it just kind of flowed. But I wish the rest of the book had been like that. And I wish it wasn't about murdering cats. Might be slightly fussy there. It just, I don't know, it just didn't sit well with me at all. And it has a lot of praise, but yeah, it just didn't feel comfortable. Especially when there's cute pictures of cats on the front. So, don't read that book unless you like to read about cats being murdered, in which case you will love it. That's it. Those are the books I read this month. I read 60 books in 2019. Woohoo! I'm really chuffed with that. Really, really chuffed. I read an awful lot. I might set my target a bit lower next year in 2020 because I feel like 60 books, sometimes I felt like I was reading to hit that target rather than reading for enjoyment. But maybe that's just because I was on a bad book, I don't know. But I might set it a bit lower and then it would be good to go over the target. Maybe 55, I don't know. Anyway, I hope that you have enjoyed these book videos throughout 2019. There will be more in 2020 and I'll see you again soon. Alright, bye.